Hi, everyone. On behalf of the Southeast New England Program Network, welcome to our webinar titled Introducing the New England Stormwater Retrofit Manual, brought to you by the UNH Stormwater Center. My name is Leah Soloway from the New England Environmental Finance Center, and I'll be managing logistics for today's program. Before we get started, I'd like to introduce and provide you all with a little background about the SNEP Network. The SNEP Network's mission is to empower communities to achieve healthy watersheds, sustainable financing, and long-term climate resilience through the management of stormwater and restoration projects. The SNEP Network focuses on building local capacity by providing no-cost trainings, webinars, and technical assistance to communities in the SNEP region. If you'd like to learn more, please visit our website, snepnetwork.org. And before we begin the webinar, there are a few logistics to keep in mind. First, everyone will be on mute to ensure audio quality. At the end of the webinar, there'll be a Q&A session. You'll be able to ask questions by typing them into the Q&A box on your Zoom control panel. We look forward to answering questions, so please type them in at any time. And on that note, I'd like to hand things over to Dr. James Houle, Director of the UNH Stormwater Center.
Great. Thanks, Leah. Can you see my screen, hopefully?
Looks good.
All right, great. Well, thanks, everyone. And it's great to be able to talk about the retrofit manual again. This was first produced in the summer of 2022. And we continue to kind of, we're hoping to plan for updates as well. Possibly early this fall. So the hope is it becomes a kind of iterative sort of living document. I do want to briefly, the Stormwater Center did not do this by any on its own. We're thankful to the SNEP Network who provided the funding, and also to the manual team that included Nate Pacheco and Teresa McGovern from VHB, and also Mark Voorhees, formerly of EPA Region 1. This is kind of a lot of his lifetime of work is sort of memorialized in this manual. So again, thanks to the SNEP Network for the funding. And also we had a pretty diverse and large technical advisory committee. I'll introduce everybody's names at the end, but included representatives from all New England states. So I think Leah went over the Southeast New England program primary goals. It was launched by EPA Region 1 in 2012. The program mission is really to foster collaboration across the SNEP, the Southern New England region. As we know, we all work in EPA Region 1, and there's a lot of benefits that other states derive from the work that the SNEP Network is doing. If you haven't had a chance to look at the manual or download it, I provided a QR code here if that's helpful. Otherwise, you can just visit the SNEP Network website, and it's available there under resources. So I wanted to start off just briefly talking about what is a retrofit. And a retrofit is kind of a structural stormwater control or modification of an existing control in the already built environment. So what it's easy to kind of describe a retrofit by what it's not. It is not a structural control that's part of a development or redevelopment permit or plan. So it's not necessarily, does not replace the regulations and guidelines that exist state by state and municipality by municipality for new and redevelopment projects. It's really a niche in and of itself of how to impart structural controls to improve water quality and reduce quantity in the already built environment. So it's very conducive to for designing and responding to things like total maximum daily loads or other impairments that impair or water resource limited impairments that would require municipalities to respond and implement in the already built environment. And we are adopting the stormwater control measure, and that's sort of that acronym is replacing BMP, although I still kind of use them both interchangeably. So the goal really is to provide up-to-date research-based guidance for planning, siting, designing, and implementing retrofits in the built environment, as I said, and really takes advantage of the crediting and runoff reduction accounting metrics that were developed by EPA Region 1, and pretty much universally, if they haven't been adopted throughout New England, they are actively being adopted now. So we've seen a lot of updates of manuals. The new New Hampshire Stormwater Manual embraces and utilizes the curves. The Connecticut manual that was just recently updated as well. We know the draft Mass adopts the Mass Stormwater Handbook has adopted, at least in part, a lot of the performance curves. Maine is working on their manual now, and also Vermont has adopted elements of the curves, certainly for the Lake Champlain TMDL. So it's very consistent, again, across the New England region, largely because it was developed using New England specific data and empirical data from a range of different stormwater control measure studies that have been conducted in the area. This manual really fills that gap, I would say, that exists as municipalities try to respond to increasing regulations, municipalities or even private entities are needing to retrofit potentially to come into compliance with evolving standards and increasing regulatory thresholds. So it's really, suited to help people intervene and create structural controls in the built environment to meet ever-increasing water quality standards. Some of the tools that exist in the manual are the performance curve. So it's a great, the manual provides a good overview of what the performance curves are, how they were developed, how they continue to be implemented and improved, and hopefully it can be a living kind of repository for a lot of the updates. So there's a number of updates that have been have happened since 2022 when the manual first came out, and it helps put us all on in a consistent accounting framework to quantify the benefits of these structural controls and these implementation efforts. And as the science improves, so too will the performance curves. It also advances inspection and maintenance considerations, as well as retrofit specific design guidance for different structural controls. Sorry about that. Yeah. All right. So I want to talk a little bit about the context of stormwater implementation in the present day. And if you've seen any of my presentations before, I really like this graph. This is the Gartner hype cycle. It's a graphical presentation that represents when a disruptive technology is introduced into a market, how it matures and through the adoption phase. And it really includes, for me, I don't think the implementation context on the stormwater side is a straight line. It's very much a little bit of a roller coaster. And I think this is common and typical for kind of emerging and maturing technical approaches. So early on, we have the peak of inflated expectations, how Rain gardens are going to save the world and solve all our problems. And we know that it's not that simple. That if you Google, how to design a bioretention system, you'll have millions of hits on Google in 0.34 seconds. And there's a lot of work that's involved in how to adapt that to the local context, how to develop it in a way that it's easy to maintain in your municipality, how to do it at a low cost. And we know all these non-proprietary systems aren't created equal. There's a huge diversity of how these things get implemented, and it really needs this refinement that comes after you fall into the trough of disillusionment. And I think as people gain experience, and that experience feeds back into the design process so that communities know more about what they like, and what they can maintain and what is suitable in the municipal and particularly the maintenance culture within the municipality. I think that's how we begin to emerge onto the slope of enlightenment. We improve designs and we're able to implement them in a more cost-effective and certainly more technically effective manner. So this is the goal. We know it's not a straight line, and no matter where you are on this kind of trajectory, we know it's not a straight line. Which also brings me to this kind of next point about planning to implementation. I've said for a while, or I've been saying maybe for too long, that I feel like we're on that threshold between a planning economy, where we spend a lot of time developing control plans and pollutant control plans, and we're moving fast into an implementation economy, right? Which is going to be very different. The guidelines and the rules upon how we do this are going to be very different as we move into this implementation economy. And the hope is that this retrofit manual kind of embodies the learning that we've had over the last couple decades of implementation, and becomes sort of the fertile ground upon which this new implementation economy emerges, and benefiting from the implementation efforts that we've been able to do to date. So we see this across the spectrum of where we work in the stormwater world. TMDLs have been kind of the roadmap for a long time, and that's actively being replaced by more adaptive management strategies, knowing that we have to build, we have to measure, and then we have to adapt our solutions in response to our experience. So the old school was, we kind of had a finish line, right? We had a load reduction that we were approaching, and we felt that we understood or were able to calculate the universe of structural options that exist as solutions. And all we had to do is a more linear kind of timeline for implementation. And in 20 years, we'd be done. We know that's really not the case. And in fact, it can't be, because the science is one of the most exciting, I think, aspects of this is the science is constantly changing and improving. And so I guess the challenge or the shift of the mindset is, maybe it's not such a finish line approach. Maybe we don't have as good of a grasp as we thought we did on the universe of structural controls and non-structural controls, for that matter, that are going to lead to the solutions that are going to be implemented over the next 2 decades. Maybe we're more at the starting line, and we have a good basis of tools in our toolbox, and we will continue from that starting point. And as we learn, we will adapt. And as the information and the science improves, we will build better modeling tools. And so this is kind of the new framework that I've been embracing, and certainly is reflected in the retrofit manual. It's not like we feel we have this surrounded and fully figured out. We're very much kind of at the beginning of this, and hope that these documents continue to advance And then the science continues to advance as we innovate. It's not just in the structural world or the engineering world where these changes are happening. It's also in the legal world. And we've seen a number of really groundbreaking legal topics that have really changed the landscape upon which we do implementation in the stormwater world. So we've seen the Loper-Bright ruling that has removed kind of Chevron deference. And so it puts it more into the legal framework about, you know, when there's questions arise as to kind of some of the legal nature of the regulations. We've also recently seen this transition to more quantitative standards and a move away from narrative standards as evidenced by the San Francisco versus EPA decision. And of course, in Region 1, we've been doing this since 2012 when the first drafts of the MS4 permits for Massachusetts and New Hampshire came out, and there was a push to move to more quantitative standards as opposed to narrative standards. And that's kind of where we are today, and that's what the performance curves really represent. And then on top of that, we've seen, especially in New England, really rampant evolution around residual designation. In most parts of the country outside of Region 1 and probably Region 9, which is California, nobody really knows what residual designation authority is. And so I guess we can consider ourselves lucky in New England. I think most states are, every state in New England probably has cut their teeth on residual designation. And we've seen that as evidenced in the new, also known as CII, commercial, industrial, and institutional requirements around existing developments, of course, which then segues right into retrofit, where a lot of commercial, industrial, and institutional properties may be required to retrofit existing technologies to meet the ever-increasing standards. And of course, outside of the stormwater world, this is not that odd of a request. There's plumbing standards that are constantly changing and evolving. There's electrical standards, there's building standards, and we're always moving towards the new, maintaining new compliance of the new standards, right? If you're doing any type of upgrade, you're being asked to comply with the latest and greatest standards, and really that's what the RDA represents in the stormwater world as well, bringing the non-compliant, outdated standards into the 21st century. And then I have a QR code here. There's a great, if you want to know more about this, there's a great panel at the National Stormwater Policy Forum that was put on by WEF and NAMSA, the National Municipal Stormwater Alliance. This past February, I believe, in DC. So I want to talk a little bit about how the manual can be used and highlight two different approaches. One would be a more opportunistic approach, where you identify either, maybe you have a reconstruction project in the downtown where you're updating streets and sidewalks, and that is a great opportunity to incorporate stormwater management and do a more complete design. Or maybe you have areas that are currently under development or consideration for redevelopment, and you're taking advantage of that opportunity to implement structural controls. And the idea here is we're proactive, we're developing it in line as other things are also happening in the area. Maybe you're combining it, with a water line update or some other activity. And we can incorporate incremental improvements in the stormwater controls. So we can use these resources in the retrofit manual to tailor our design and get the maximum benefits, even though we know that, it's not going to be the same as if we were designing from scratch, or all the regulations and requirements that might be incorporated if you're doing it from scratch. So what we're taking advantage of here, and what the science demonstrates, is that any type of improvement, no matter how small, is a benefit. And it's not linear. Again, it's very incremental, such that if you're sizing a system for a fraction of the size that you would conventionally do for a new or redevelopment, it doesn't mean you get that fraction of the performance. You get a penalty, but it's not as dramatic as you would expect. And we'll go over that as we move into the performance curves. You can also utilize this as a regulatory requirement. So we've seen a lot of requirements happen through consent decrees or TMDLs, and it's possible you have a whole based on a watershed approach, where you have a whole area where you're trying to meet a particular target, whether that's a water quality target or a volume reduction target or some combination. So you're using these metrics to quantify the goals, identifying potential sites, identifying structural controls, using the curves to size and optimize, and then implementing. And so it can very much be included as part of a either a regional plan or a pollution control plan based on a watershed area. And that's under some regulatory authority. And the heart of how we do this is the SCM performance curves. So if you haven't heard of these before, then welcome to the new world of sizing and designing systems. So we're using these performance curves to help us, again, do the retrofit, build what we can, where we can, how we can, and take credit for whatever it is we think we can do. And as I said, the curves are not linear, they're more logarithmic. And what that means is essentially for a small size, it's not like we get a small benefit. We get a somewhat of a penalty, but the whole idea of the performance curve is there's an optimal point where we're getting the maximum load reduction or volume control for a effective cost or effective sizing. And so whether you're designing out here at the very tail end of the curve, or you're designing at the knee of the curve, which would be the tangent of the line, which would be optimal sizing, or whether you're down at the lower end, because that's what you can fit in, we have a way to quantify the benefits of any size system. So this really helps move forward and I think innovate that the regulatory landscape of where we work, where we can do incremental installations and implementation efforts and still gain the benefit that the science demonstrates can be gained from that. So just a few things, I kind of already went over this, but depending on what your prioritization is, you can use the curves to help you size the system. Oftentimes, when you're working in the built environment already, sometimes the site designs itself because you have a limited space, you have other constraints that limits what you can do, the depth and the width of your system. And so oftentimes, we have the sizing of our system is kind of predetermined by, this is the space we have available, here's the contributing area, and this is what we can do. And that's okay. We can use the curves to quantify the benefits of that. You can also use the curves to, let's say, if you have a certain pollutant reduction target, say a 60% phosphorus reduction, you can use the curves to target that. And you can build at at least in kind of an economically feasible manner to meet the target and not spend too much money. You can also use it to increase the benefits. So, typically we're sizing systems for the 1-inch water quality volume. You can use the curves to go, beyond that and get more benefits. So there's a number of ways that you can design with these curves. And I think the flexibility of implementing them is really the biggest benefit here, because we can, again, do what is feasible and calculate and account for the benefits that are associated. So there's a lot of focus on what we call the knee of the curve, or this tangent, as it represents the point at which the marginal gains are not substantiated by the marginal benefits. If you're moving beyond this, you have diminishing returns. So you're spending more and more money to build a bigger and bigger system, and the return on that investment is smaller and smaller, or it's diminished, right? You're not getting as many benefits as you build out on the shoulder as you do at the knee of the curve. And that's the whole premise behind the optimization. So this is a way where we can actually reduce the costs and still meet the water quality targets associated with our implementation efforts. So way back when we were implementing that old finish line style model, there was a lot of angst around the nature of the cost that this was actually going to, that the communities that are implementing this are going to have to bear. We're still going to be spending money. However, I think utilization of tools like this that are embodied in the retrofit manual are going to dramatically decrease the associated costs while still delivering the benefits of the implementation efforts. So that's the hope. So here's just, again, another example of how we would optimize in the various physical storage capacities. So this is the depth of runoff from the contributing impervious area across the range of different things that we can reduce and calculate using these curves. So a physical storage capacity of 0.8 inches is the optimal area for bacteria in green here. For phosphorus, it's around 0.8 inches. And again, this is just one example of a curve for an infiltration basin on a hydrologic soil C type of soil. And identifying those tangents again, or the knee of the curve. So for TSS, or total suspended solids, is around 0.4. And then for nitrogen metals, it's also 0.4. For runoff depth at in this particular soil type, is going to be the physical storage capacity of 1. So 1 inch. So the equivalent of 1 inch of runoff from the associated contributing impervious area. As we move through like to an A soil, these are going to shift. And as we go to a D soil or more restrictive soil, they're going to change again. So we can do this. I think now we're calculating over 9 different infiltration rates in the existing permit. I think it's over 6. So we're adding to this model and adding pollutants as well. Bacteria or fecal indicator bacteria is a new addition. And then, we're continuing to add not only the structural and non-structural controls that we can account for, but add these other elements we're adding. This is all done essentially by continuous simulation modeling in SWIM, and it's utilizing formerly a 24, now a 29-year rainfall record. So really robust hydrology, which is one of the biggest advancements associated with these types of metrics. Wanted to show another example of utilizing the impervious cover disconnection. So this is something, the impervious cover disconnection can be used to quantify the benefits of impervious cover that's not directly connected, or that's directed towards pervious area. And so, formerly we used to use things like the Sutherland equations, which would give you sort of an arbitrary estimate of the directly connected impervious area. Now we can actually go out, and when we're evaluating, say, municipal sites, we can evaluate that with a site visit, and we can identify the directly connected impervious and what's effectively disconnected, and we can quantify the load reductions associated with that. So I think this in and of itself is one of the huge advancements as we look forward to implementing phosphorus control plans or nitrogen control plans or whatever control plans you're working on. We can identify this impervious cover disconnection and maybe even enhance it in some places, and reap the pollutant load reduction benefits associated using these types of curves. So the IC disconnection is a little bit different. It doesn't use a physical storage capacity. It uses the impervious area to pervious area ratio. So at the bottom is an 8:1 ratio. So that's 8 units of impervious area to 1 unit of pervious area, and that gets the lowest reduction. And you can go all the way to 1 to 70. So that's 1 unit of impervious to 70 units of pervious area. So depending on where you fall on these curves and what hydrologic soil group is associated with it, we can now quantify the benefits as a percent removal for a certain constituent. So really, really innovative. And I think this is something that we haven't considered to the extent that is beneficial. Maybe outside of the DOT environment, right? Because departments of transportation are probably using this a lot as they direct road runoff into like the permeable median strips. So, but this can also benefit the municipalities and other sites as well. And I think in, So I think I mentioned a little bit about the really dynamic landscape, the regulatory landscape happening in New England. We have consent agreements with Mass and Rhode Island DOT that are using these elements to advance those permits. Lake Champlain, I mentioned, has a TMDL, and they're using components of these curves. Essentially, the quantification is very similar. So when Lake Champlain implemented their TMDL, they just didn't invent new credits. They used the science available from Region 1 at the time, and they incorporated it in their credits. Of course, the Mass and New Hampshire permits have added that. In the Great Bay in New Hampshire has a total nitrogen general permit, and we're using these curves to track and account for our implementation efforts. And 319 program has included this in their programmatic WAP to use the curves to quantify benefits. It's incorporated in the Stormwater manual, in the Retrofit manual, and of course, in Connecticut, they've implemented in the Mass DEP handbook, they've implemented the New Hampshire manual that just came out is using these. So the trend is continuing to grow, which is great. Is as we all use similar metrics and we all do it in a regionally consistent way, we can piggyback from all the other benefits. We've already talked to the folks in Vermont, and they have a lot more agriculture than, say, we do in New Hampshire. We can use their credits associated with their agricultural controls. And as long as we're using the similar regionally consistent methods, we can adapt or borrow or commandeer their credits, and the list goes on and on. As we advance this, we can continue to build this toolbox of approaches. I just wanted to take a little bit of time and talk about the science that's behind this. Because while these are modeled using continuous simulation, rainfall data, but again, as I said, over a 24 or 29-year rainfall record, it's also been calibrated by a lot of the empirical data we've collected in New Hampshire and others have collected across the region. And early on, Mark was instrumental in getting funding to actually design based on the curves and actually test a couple of sites. And so we did that. We developed two retrofits. One would be a subsurface gravel wetland retrofit, and the other was a bioretention soil media that used an internal storage reservoir. And these sites were retrofits. I don't know that I have pictures on the previous slide. One was in a small median strip that treated a neighborhood that was discharging right to the Oyster River. And adjacent to this was a park, and on the other side was a homeowner. So when we were designing this, again, like I said, the site kind of designs itself because we fit it within the 20-foot municipal right-of-way that the city had as it had its outfall right to the Oyster River. So in this case, this is Durham, in New Hampshire. So we took that right-of-way, and that's where we put our system. If we would have built it any bigger to the left, we would have been invading on a homeowner's yard. If we had built it any more to the right, we would be invading in the recreational space of a urban park that gets pretty wide utilization. Same thing in the bioretention retrofit. We put it in the median, parking median in a downtown parking lot. So again, our options here were pretty limited to the existing median. Had we expanded it more, we would have upset people by taking up parking spaces. And so, we fit it where we could. The result was that the gravel wetland was about 1/10 of the size that it should have been had we sized it conventionally. So it has a physical storage capacity of I don't know if they even have what that is, but it's a 0.1 inches. So normally we size it for 1 inch, and this was sized for 0.1 inch rainfall, which kind of seemed laughable, I think, in the beginning. The bioretention has a physical storage capacity of 0.23 inches. And again, it's what we could fit in. And so the question was, what were the benefits? And so if you look at the results, essentially here is a conventional bioretention, an average of 4. So conventionally sized at 91% removal. Here's sediment, nitrogen, phosphorus. And then the green is the undersized bioretention. So at physical storage capacity at 0.23 inches. So it was 1/8 of the size, yet we got we had a reduction penalty of only 10% TSS removal. So we went from 91% for a conventionally sized system to 81% removal, which is still great for a, what would be deemed as a severely undersized system. On the gravel wetland, again, here's the average of a conventionally sized gravel wetland with a physical storage capacity of 1 inch to a system where the physical storage capacity was 0.1 inch. And again, it's logarithmic, it's not linear. We didn't get 1/10 of the benefits. We had a small penalty associated with the size, and instead of 96% reduction, we got 75% reduction. And the same is virtually true across the board for the other constituents as well. Again, we're not seeing a huge variation of performance. And in some cases, we're getting better performance in the undersized system than we were in the conventionally sized system. A lot of that has to do with, again, just the statistics of the precipitation patterns. So, or the precipitation, frequency. So when we look at New England, the water quality volume was typically identified as a economic sizing it used the 1-inch rain event, as that was the 90th percentile precipitation frequency. So 90% of the time when it rained, it was 1 inch or less. But again, it's kind of interesting how we fixated on that 1 inch. Maybe it was a round number. We could have easily gone with, if we had gone with, say, 0.5 inches, a half an inch. Instead of 90% of the rainfall probability, we would have gotten 2/3, so 67%. Interestingly, if we go down to even as small as a 0.2 inch rain depth, we're still getting around 40% of the rainfall. So when it rains, 40% of the time, it's 0.2 inches or less. So I think, and then even if it's undersized, we're still getting the first flush of that storm event processed through our system. So in a lot of cases, this modeling really takes advantage of the dynamic nature of the hydrology that runs through our structural controls. Whereas previously we were using more of a static design or a static kind of estimation of the benefits. So I wanted to just highlight, and I think I have references at the end, that we have calculators that can help you size these types of systems. And again, I think I'll show that at the end where those resources are. So chapter 4 talks about stormwater control measures and selection. And the idea behind chapter 4 is really to use the science that we use for the other water utilities, drinking water and wastewater, unit operations and unit processes. And unit operations and unit processes are really the underpinnings of how water gets treated through our engineered systems. Operations or methods really apply to a physical process. It's like operations such as filtration or hydrologic modification. And unit processes refer to chemical or biological process. So this is like, vegetative uptake is a unit process that, say, bioretention would implement through its vegetation regime in order to sequester nutrients in the biomass. So unit operations and unit processes really, in my mind, lift a veil on the nomenclature behind how we name and categorize structural controls. And if we understand and better understand unit operations and unit processes, we can start to kind of piece them together. So I think Brian Burns he's the head of Rhode Island Parks. He has called this the Mr. Potato Head method. So we can take unit operations, unit processes that we know work very well for a certain pollutant of concern, and we can Mr. Potato Head it into our structural control. So whether this looks like internal storage reservoirs and bioretention systems that help reduce nitrogen, or media amendments that scavenge phosphorus in bioretention soil mix, we can take advantage of these known, defined operations and processes to enhance the performance of our system. So chapter 4 goes up a lot into that. And I think that's a very useful chapter when you're trying to innovate or advance the performance with a particular pollutant in mind. Chapter 5 steps through the functional elements of the stormwater control measures and provides a lot of updated, seriously needed updated depictions of these types of systems. So, and hopefully you can see a lot of these are making their way into manuals. I know we used a lot of these in New Hampshire manuals to replace really outdated designs that really didn't depict at all accurately the type of stormwater control. So I'm thinking, the typical bioretention cartoon that shows trees in the bioretention. I, for one, don't typically source woody vegetation in bioretention systems. So, it's where the the graphics are old, and so we are indebted to VHB for helping us move forward at least the graphical depictions of some of these structural controls. But the functional elements of any control are pretty simple. It's collection and distribution. How do we get water from the drainage area to the treatment area? What are we going to do for pre-treatment? And again, the discussion of pre-treatment here is pretty liberal. Pre-treatment at its core is a easy to access location for more routine maintenance. So however we design that, we can benefit from more routine, easy maintenance than developing, say, a volumetrically sized forebay that's stuck behind a fence that we're never going to get to. So again, it kind of practically weighs the pros and cons of implementing some of these things. So offline deep sump catch basins, maybe with hoods or eliminators, could be much more beneficial as a pre-treatment device than a structural forebay stuck behind a locked fence. So what are you going to maintain more routinely? And I will always go for what's easier to access and has the potential to be maintained more routinely than something that will never be touched or never be maintained. So again, we're trying to honor the functional component here of pre-treatment, and admittedly taking a little bit more of a liberal or maybe progressive, I don't know what those words mean really, but taking a little bit more of a functional approach. And then of course, how do we then convey water from the system and discharge it to the surface or to some other collection system? So when we put it all together, we have our collection and distribution and pre-treatment at the front. We have whatever's in between that's doing all the functional elements, all the actual imparting all the control. And then we're using those unit operations, unit processes to really determine and fine tune what those UOPs are that's doing all the work. And then we're discharging. And we're taking advantage of certain things like elevating the underdrains if we can. So this really is something that we harped on. If you're going to put underdrains, elevate them within the reservoir course, and this will enhance infiltration. So little tips and tricks like that that we've garnered over the last 2 decades of the implementation that we've done. So for conclusions and next steps, all the guidance and recommendation here utilize the latest science. Again, the retrofit is targeting a unique, often uncharacterized opportunity and incorporating maximum flexibility with the understanding that if we do a little, even if we do a little, it's better than doing nothing at all. So we're not letting perfect be the enemy of good or good enough. And we're taking advantage again of the advancement, what the science tells us, and how we to continue to incorporate that into designs moving forward. So yeah, and you know, I guess the proof is in the pudding. We're seeing pretty widespread adoption of not only the retrofit manual into state manuals. Connecticut has adopted it. New Hampshire has adopted it. But we're also seeing kind of the tips and tricks and science embodied in the retrofit manual, also incorporated in these updating state manuals as well. And again, we're not inventing this. This is largely all coming from the work of folks like, you know, Mark Voorhees and Ray Cody and other people from Region 1 that have been doing this for a career. So we're really indebted to Region 1 and their approach. And yeah, and the last thing is really to acknowledge the full staff of the EPA Region 1 and the SNEP network, as well as the liaisons from Rhode Island and Massachusetts. And then our technical advisory committee included folks from all over New England with the idea that, you know, the benefits of this type of manual will certainly benefit Southern New England program, but can be extended to all of the New England states as well. So great debt of gratitude goes out to those folks. And I'll just end on the resources here where we have, I have a QR code for the place on our website where we park a lot of these calculators and tracking and accounting tools. And with that, I think hopefully, yeah, about 10 minutes for questions.
Yeah, thanks, Jamie. We have a few questions in the chat. So to start, the first one is, where does the RDA compliance stand today in New England or Massachusetts with the dismantling of federal legal and regulatory standards across the US?
Okay. Yeah, yeah, your guess is as good as mine. I mean, the draft RDA permit came out. So that has been on the streets now since the beginning of the year. And that's where we are. I'm not going to look into the crystal ball or read the tea leaves and say where that's going to go. But I think the rest of your question hints at a pretty good direction.
The next question and comment is, Jamie and team, incredible manual. Really happy to see this come out. We have a new product, Kaipono Solutions, that is being used heavily for sediment pretreatment of biofiltration and stormwater filtration here on the West Coast. And the question is, will the manual have a suggested devices section, or is the manual's main purpose to allow agencies to use what they want?
Yeah, great question. So the vision here is that this manual could be a spot where innovations kind of get a foothold. So due to the fact that it's non-regulatory and it's only guidance, it's a great location for new innovations. So for instance, is we have a lot of work on proprietary devices. I would say high flow rate media filters. We have developed performance curves for that through a grant from EPA Region 1. I'm really hoping that our update this fall can incorporate those curves into a manual like this. And again, what is the downside of that? It only serves to highlight technologies that are innovative and available. We've had the same discussions around floating wetlands or floating vegetative islands. Again, something that doesn't have really a foothold in existing state manuals now, but could easily we could easily gather the data available, develop performance curves, and debut them in a non-regulatory guidance manual like this. So I feel like this is a great showcase for innovations. I don't know anything about the Kaipono system, but again, I think the benefits of a retrofit manual like this is we highlight innovative technologies and continue to advance the science. That's what the whole goal is.
Our next question is, how hard is it to retrofit a retrofit?
Good question. I think that is an unexplored frontier. So I've given a couple presentations on, if we think of something that's complex that we know we're going to spend millions and millions of dollars on, whether it's the nitrogen control plans we're doing in New Hampshire or the phosphorus control plans they're doing in the Charles. Like, what am I going to do if I'm a municipality? I want to take advantage of the lowest of the low-hanging fruit. And one of those low-hanging fruits are likely retrofit of an existing structural control. So you take something like a pond or something like a detention basin that we know doesn't impart the water quality benefits that are available from the more innovative, up-to-date technologies. And we retrofit that into a wetland, or we retrofit that into another filtration technology if we can. And now we can even deduce just from using the curves of what a transition from a pond to a gravel wetland would produce as far as load reduction. and we can see the benefits. And the cost are going to be, the cost benefits are going to be much lower than developing a new structural control. So if I were a municipality, I would take advantage of impervious cover disconnection. I can get areas that where the impervious cover is not directly connected, I can get credits today from those areas, as long as I identify them and calculate them based on the methods in this manual. Next thing I would do is I would retrofit existing structures, move a low functioning detention or retention basin into a high functioning wetland style system. And again, the costs associated with that transition are going to, the dollars per pound removed are going to be low compared with, you know, building something from scratch. So good, very good question. And that's where one of the places I'd be looking. I'd be getting existing structures credited and accounted for, ensuring that they're inspected and maintained. And then I would be retrofitting existing structures to get higher pollutant target.
We have 2 more questions, and I think we have time to get to these 2. The next question is, what are you seeing across different states in terms of implementation of the manuals? Any pushback and from where?
So what we see now, and I can only speak to New England, that's where I live and work. I also feel like when you look across the country, New England has always been sort of the tip of the spear. So for better or for worse, New England is a very exciting place to live and work. Nobody's sitting on their heels here. So we're really pushing the limits of these technologies. What I see happening in every manual is we're moving beyond sort of the water quality volume, and we're going to using the performance curves, and we're moving towards what in New Hampshire we call the watershed protection standard, or in Massachusetts, they're calling the retention standard. So we're targeting retention of, say, the full 1-inch rainfall event. So in New York, they've been doing this for a while already. I think it's 3/4 of an inch, but we're retaining the 1-inch, the equivalent of the 1-inch rain event on site, and it's not leaving. So, you know, through a range of different unit operations and unit processes, that 1-inch rainfall is staying on site. And I think that is the new advancement. I think there is a lot of pushback, but we also have new and innovative tools. So if you're trying to retain the 1-inch water quality, the 1-inch rainfall event on site, and you're using the type 2 NRCS distribution, and you're using, you know, static rainfall projections, it's going to be difficult. If you're using the information embodied and then the continuous simulation modeling, and we saw this through the EPA Region 1 Taunton study, you can look that up, the holistic watershed study in Taunton, where a lot of this really came out. We know that accessing this continuous simulation modeling and the full 29-year rainfall record gets us a much better prediction of the hydrology, and it makes the 1-inch retention feet a lot more practical and a lot more achievable on site.
We have one more question. I think we have time for it, but before the final question, I just want to remind folks that we will be sending the recording to you in a follow-up email, and the resources that Jamie shared with the links in his presentation, we'll send those along as well. So be on the lookout for an email in the next 1 to 2 days. I do want to get to the final question. And the question is there guidance influencing O&M practices at the municipal level and resource allocation towards better maintenance?
I'll have to put a check in the mail for you. One of the things that we kind of lamented in this manual is we didn't feel we did operation and maintenance, the service it needed. And rather than doing a poor job at reflecting this really important topic, we identified it for funding through the SNEP network. So it is in our work plan over this next 5 years. And so that is going to be one of the next manuals that's coming out, is a full-blown manual on operation maintenance or inspection and maintenance. Because there's so much room there for improvement. So that is what we decided. We wanted to give it its benefit, its due course, and we're going to be working on that next. And partnering
stay
with the
tuned.
network and VHB to complete it. So thank you.
Yeah, great question. And that is all we have today. That's all the questions. Jamie, thank you so much for presenting. Really appreciate it. Want to thank everybody for attending. And again, we'll send a follow-up email with the link to the recording, presentation, and resources. And with that, thank you so much. Thanks, Jamie.